It's often said that the first prophecy about Jesus in the Bible is John 3:16. Let's start over. It's usually said that the first prophecy about Jesus in the Bible is Genesis 3:15, which says, "And I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed. He shall bruise you on the head, and you shall bruise him on the heel." Right after Adam and Eve sinned in the garden, God already gave them the promise that there would be this offspring of the woman, that would be Jesus, who would crush the head of the serpent, that would be Satan. There's a promise from the very beginning that God would make everything right. And this is usually said to be the first prophecy about Jesus in the Bible. But I think there was actually an earlier one. If you go back to the very beginning, Genesis chapter 1, verse 1, it says this, "In the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was formless and void, and darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was moving over the surface of the waters. Then God said, 'Let there be light,' and there was light." I think that's the first promise about Jesus in the Bible. When everything in the world was dark and purposeless, God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And think about the implications of that. When everything in our lives is dark and purposeless, God says, "Let there be light," and there's light. Now, this isn't to say that Jesus was created. Jesus was forever the Son of God, and he always existed, and yet God's answer to our darkness is Jesus. Now, I'm not just making this stuff up. John chapter 1 actually addresses this very issue. And immediately, you notice the parallels between Genesis 1 and John 1. It says this, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things came into being through him, and apart from him, nothing came into being that has come into being. In him was life, and the life was the light of men." Once again, that's Jesus. John makes this very clear that in the very beginning there was darkness, and yet God provided Jesus, who is the light. See, the first promise about Jesus isn't in reaction to our sin. It's in reaction to the darkness of the world. I mean, yes, Jesus came to conquer our sin, but he also came to conquer all darkness. And that's made even more clear in one of the I am statements of the Bible. Jesus said, "I am the light of the world." You see, from the very beginning, God's purpose was to bring light into all the world. And it's not from the sun, it's not from the moon, it's not from the stars, it's Jesus himself. Jesus is the light of the world, and Jesus came to conquer all darkness. So I want to point out one more verse. Once again, in John chapter 1, Jesus says this about John the Baptist. "There came a man sent from God whose name was John. He came as a witness, to testify about the light, so that all might believe through him. He was not the light, but he came to testify about the light. There was the true light, which coming into the world enlightens every man." God's purpose is to enlighten every man with the light of Jesus. He didn't just come for some men. He didn't just come for the Jews or for those who would call themselves Christians in this life. God's ultimate goal is to enlighten every man. God's not done with his purpose until every man, every person is enlightened by Jesus. Because Jesus is the light of the world, not some of the world, all of the world. So when God said, "Let there be light," he was eradicating the darkness. Now, that doesn't mean that for a time there's not still darkness, but it was a declaration, a promise, a prophecy that Jesus, the light of the world, would conquer all evil. Man, that's a great promise. So, rest in the promise of God. Trust in Jesus. God bless you. We'll see you again next time.